Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Ray, and welcome to the RayWenderlich.com podcast. In this podcast, we'll keep you up to date with the latest app development tech talk. Now, here are your hosts, Drew Freeman and Susanna Skyer-Gupta.
Thanks, Ray. This is the RayWenderlich.com podcast. Welcome to episode 4 for season 12. Now, this episode was recorded on Wednesday, the 15th of December, 2021, for release on the 29th of December. This episode was sponsored by Tiny Magical Fairies. I'm your host, Drew Freeman, along with my co-host, Susanna Skyer-Gupta.
Thanks, Drew. This episode will explore programming the Apple Watch in SwiftUI with Scott Grush, the author of the brand new book, WatchOS with SwiftUI by Tutorials, available from RayWenderlich.com. Joining Scott is Final Pass editor, Pablo Mateo. Pablo is a technology delivery manager at Banco Santander, and Scott is a software solution architect at a Fortune 500 company. Both Scott and Pablo have been part of the Ray Wenderlich ecosystem for many years as writers and as editors.
Pablo, Scott, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Drew.
Thank you very much.
Obviously, the big question that we have been starting with a lot this season is that COVID has kind of made life rather difficult and rather interesting in places. How have you both been facing with what's been going on in lockdown? Are you keeping busy from a home base?
Yeah, I fully work from home at this point, which is great, not having to drive into the office anymore. It's been hard on the young ones, of course. I just have one young daughter, so she was definitely missing having friends to play with, but overall, the family's doing good.
How old?
She is 7.
Oh, that's an age.
Oh, yeah.
How about you, Pablo?
Yeah, I think the hardest part was when we were all at home working all day long and we had the kids here. In my case, I have 2 kids, 3 and 5. So it was even a bit more complicated because the 3-year-old boy obviously didn't have classes. And the 5-year-old, he had Zoom classes, but you had to be with him because he obviously doesn't know how to mute himself, how to start the classes. So it was a bit tricky to organize with my wife so we could both work, but at the same time keep our boys busy and having fun and not thinking that they were at home all that long. So, well, it's been quite an experience, but I think in the end it all worked okay, and things have changed in the way of working, communicating, and I think that we have to take the good parts of this experience.
So, from your end, what are the good parts? What are you hoping we hang on to as people working in tech and just as people going forwards?
Never having to go back into the office.
See,
Well,
it's easy for me. I've been actually a remote developer since about 2.5-3 years before COVID hit. So for me, that's sort of the lifestyle and such. I look at jobs now, and when they're posted and they say remote until COVID, I'm like, well, we're going to have a discussion about that because
Yeah.
You were about to say, Pablo.
Yeah, in my case, I used to work remotely, and then I joined the company where I work now, and then COVID started, so I kind of like came back to the old way of working, fully remote. But I do miss sometimes the company of other people. I think that right now we're working 2 or 3 days at home and the rest at the office, and I think that's a great balance. And well, I think that companies should try to let their employees to find the thing that works the best for them. Some prefer fully remote, others would like to go some days to the office, and I think that we all have to have that open mind that we can all arrange the way that works to all of us, and that's very positive and a better way of working, I think.
Oh, here. And I do think, thinking back to those days when I was working part-time and had young children at home, I think it feels a little different. Like I liked being able to leave the house and go to work. And there are parts about going to work and leaving the house that like are such ordinary, who cares kinds of parts. Like, oh, there's a cafeteria. Like there'd always been a cafeteria, but like whatever. And then all of a sudden, when you're covered in like sticky Cheerio bits, the idea that you can wear something that isn't so machine washable and eat only with adults is like a super great thing about work. So I think it depends on what your life is like, how, what the ideal work environment is. But I love that idea that we're going to bring flexibility forwards. I hope so.
So, Pablo, what is the status internationally as far as Madrid and Spain is concerned?
Well, right now the situation was quite good. We had a lot of the population, like over 80% of the population, is fully vaccinated. So that
Go
has made
Spain.
so that has made that the incidence has dropped down quite a lot. Right now, for example, this past week, the amount of people with COVID is increasing. They say that it's because of this Omicron new variant that propagates much more. But on the other hand, it's less aggressive. So hospitals are not in the situation that they were. So like a lot of people are getting COVID, but very few are getting in a risk situation or critical. So, well, one thing for the other. And well, we're looking at Christmas and the Christmas holidays to see if cases don't grow too much. So because right now, well, things are starting to change a little bit. We're looking at the situation as it's increasing a little bit, and we hope that it stays stable and it doesn't grow much more.
And are you guys doing a big push over there for the boosters? I know it's in the news in the US that the UK is doing a massive push to get everybody their boosters. Is that happening there in Spain too?
What's a booster? Sorry.
So our shots here have been a series of two, like one Pfizer and a second Pfizer, or one Moderna and a second Moderna, or one of each. I've heard that called the swamp water cocktail. So the booster is a third shot of either of those, or if we have another vaccine available here called Johnson & Johnson that is apparently less effective. And so it was a one shot, but that also needs a booster. And the theory is that the booster makes you less likely to get sick with Omicron.
Yeah, the booster, right now I think people over 50, most of them have a booster. So for example, my parents, my grandparents, they already have a third doses of Pfizer in this case. So the booster here is the third one. And they have recently said that they are opening vaccination also for children over 5 years old. So
excellent.
It's starting now. Yeah.
All right, let's get technical. There's a wonderful book out now, and it's a book that's dear to my heart because I absolutely love my watch. And I am so thrilled that this book is now available because there are just so many things I started in WatchOS when WatchOS was pretty much in its nascence. Now it's maturing a lot. So where was the draw for both of you to move on to this topic?
So for me, honestly, it was Amanda asking me if I'd be willing to write it.
And I wonder how she knew that you might be like, are you known around here as like, oh, Scott, he's like crazy for the watch, or oh, Scott has some watch apps in the store, or like, how'd she know Scott will say yes to that?
I'd actually never done a watch app before, but I had worked twice with Manda, once on the push notification book and once on the concurrency book. And so she just thought, hey, we did 2 other successful books. Maybe she'd want to do this one. And I thank her for that.
And what made you say yes?
I really like working on the books with you guys. They're fun to develop. It keeps me in the kind of iOS world, which I don't get to do at my day job. And I love learning and figuring out new things. And so having not played with the watch, her saying, "Hey, will you write this book for me?" I had to really dive into it and figure out a lot of new stuff. And it was just a chance to play and learn.
Oh, that's really cool. Kind of similar to um, in our last episode, we talked to a former co-host, Jay Strawn, and Jay was telling us about how his first book here was a wildly complicated. It was design patterns by tutorials. And so Jay was not at that point an expert dev even, but they asked Jay to do it because Jay was a really good writer outside of the dev world. And and then he totally rose to the occasion and like loved doing the research, right? So
I kind of credit
really
the Ray
cool.
Wenderlich team as a whole for always supporting their authors, their whole teams, and they always step up to really great pieces of technological tutorial matter. Pablo,
So I'm curious
yeah, Pablo, what hooked you on this book?
In my case, I was FBA for the SwiftUI by tutorials. So having SwiftUI in a WatchOS, I thought it was a great idea. And also, I agree that this is a wonderful device and it has a lot of potential. So I thought it was a perfect combination, WatchOS with SwiftUI. It's a book that was needed. So I jumped in as soon as it was proposed.
And let's
I thought Pablo was going to say he heard that I was involved and therefore wanted to.
I think he was just getting to that.
Yeah, I was going to say that exactly. And also knowing that Scott was the author.
Let's drop some names and get the rest of the team on this one. Scott and Pablo, who were the rest of the team for this?
We had Nick Brognes as tech editor and Piotr Fulmansky. I hope I'm pronouncing both names correctly. They were both the tech editors of the book. And we had April Reims as editor and Manda obviously helping.
Of course, Manda.
Yeah.
So
I think, yeah.
So you basically had not done WatchOS coming into this book. Where do you start? I mean, obviously, for us, we start by reading your book. Where do you start not having that?
I looked at the original book that Ray had done years ago, and got some good knowledge from that. And then I just, I dove into the WWDC videos and some of the tutorials we have on the Ray Wenderlich site. There's definitely a ton of good material out there. And, I found myself, especially with the WWDC videos, realizing that, okay, this is like the 9th time I've watched this video because I pick up an extra little piece each time I'd go. I'd start to write about something and think, well, how could this be better? And I'd go watch the video again and go, oh right, gotcha. So there's definitely a wealth of good knowledge.
So there's so many different components to the watch for development. There are apps, there are complications, there are health kit connections, there's notification. What technology really interested you about the watch?
For me, it was the complications.
Mm-hmm.
It's funnily named because they're not that complicated, but it's the name that they give for all the little icons that appear on the watch face, and just realizing some of the benefits you could get out of them, just making the experience even faster for an app. In an iOS phone app, you expect your customers to be in there for minutes at a time, sometimes hours if it's a game. On a watch, you have to assume they're going to spend 3-4 seconds and move on. And so having that complication gives you that glance at it, look away, and you've interacted with it the way you needed to.
Now, Suze,
that's a really good point.
Suze, you mentioned to me earlier the history of the word complication.
Yeah, I was going to say, first, I wanted to say that that's a really good point that when you're thinking about user experience and usability, that the watch is a thing to itself. That because the time, the attention that time that you can really expect your user to spend on your complication is really minimal, and it should be really minimal. So wow, your UX has to be perfect. So Scott, I learned in your book, I never understood this before, that what a complication is. So I had always thought, because I'd only heard the word in the context of WatchOS apps, that it was synonymous with an app. Like I thought a complication was an app, like maybe written by a third-party developer. But I learned that a complication comes from the world of watches. I guess we say horology, and it's anything that's on a watch face other than hours, minutes, seconds. So, like I was sharing with Drew, that when my dad passed away, I inherited some watches that he had, and some of these are really nice and have like the dial where it shows like the moon phase. And so that's an example of a complication from the world before Apple Watch, because there was a world like that. Although, who cares now? But
Exactly. Yeah.
so that's cool that the complication is the UI, the visual part that you see on your tiny magical fairy screen of the watch.
Drew mentioned the HealthKit integration, and that's one of the great things about the advances Apple's made for the watches now is that most things that work in the iOS world now just naturally work in the watchOS world. There's still some exceptions like audio related items, but there's really no difference in the API you're using now between the watch or a phone when you access HealthKit. The way you display it, the way you interact with it, you design a different user experience, but the raw make this HealthKit call, it's not different anymore. And so it opens up the world to so many small companies that don't have the resources to hire a dedicated watch person that they did in the past. Now they can just take, Suzy developer and say, oh, hey, add a watch app to our existing app, and they'd be able to do it.
That's really cool. So it's getting easier. Now they're different. What's another thing that's super amazing on the watch, though, is that there are increasingly different sensors, right, that are health related. So is all that functionality open to us as developers, or is there some stuff that's still closed off for Apple only?
Yeah, not yet. A lot of it is still closed off. The pieces you can natively access through HealthKit are there, but like if you want to take in EKG on your watch, you just stick your finger on the crown. There's not a specific, way that we can do that kind of touch-enabled thing.
Okay, yeah, that is what I was asking. So
Do you have
we'll see.
access? Do you have access to the accelerometer?
I want to say yes, but I'm not positive.
Because it would make for the ultimate Harry Potter style application to be able to wave your hand around with the watch on it.
Right. So for recording purposes, I'm going to say, no, unfortunately, Drew, you can't do that. And then I'm going to say, yeah, you can definitely get the accelerometer, Drew.
I'll edit that appropriately. So go ahead.
So who's the right audience for this book, you guys? Like if somebody's listening and thinks they just got a watch or they're about to get a watch, this all sounds so cool, but they're a brand new developer. Do you feel like this book would be accessible to them? Like what does a newbie, like a real newbie, need to know to get something out of this book?
Not a ton. Go ahead.
Sorry, Scott. Go.
I'd say not a ton. The book is written assuming a certain level of existing knowledge. We don't teach you how to use Swift. We don't teach a lot of the core iOS type concepts, But if you have a level of experience with iOS already, now your junior developer can absolutely jump in and work on a watch app. If you had asked me that 2 years ago, I would have said, nope, you need a dedicated person who understands the watch APIs because they're 100% different. Now, with the advent of being able to use SwiftUI on the watch programming, it opens it up to everybody who has iOS experience.
That sounds great.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that. I worked in an app, in a watch app a couple of years ago, and the situation is completely different from right now. And just what Scott said, I wouldn't recommend it to someone that's just starting, because I think you need a knowledge base before with Swift and the programming language and a bit of the iOS ecosystem. But the book, it's really well structured and explained in a very easy way to follow. So with very little experience, you can jump in and create an Apple Watch for your application on something that was before unthinkable. You need even much more knowledge on the watch than in iPhone specifically. So that has changed quite a lot.
When I started writing my app, I actually started by writing just a complication to see if I could. And this was several years ago when complication writing was complicated. Yeah. I have to update those because there's so much that can be updated now. But this was also back during the time that if you wanted to write an app for the watch, you had to have it attached to an app for the phone.
Mm.
There was no concept of just a watch app.
Yeah, exactly.
And now, Scott, I think you're about to launch right into this, but remind us. So now, today, if we're programming for the watch today, we could write an app that's only for the watch. We could write an app that's a companion app to an app on the phone. Isn't there some third choice also?
No, it's basically you can have just an iOS app, you can have just a WatchOS app, or you can have them both.
Okay.
Oh, well, okay. So the third option, I guess, is you can have a watch app that allows but does not require a companion iPhone app.
Okay.
What would be like, when would you do that? What's a good use case for that?
So one of the examples I used in the book was you might have an application for purchasing movie tickets, and you don't require either of those devices for the functionality, but you probably have an iPhone as well. And so you want to provide the app with a bigger, easier to use interface. Yet at the same time, you would have the app on the watch so that when you walk up to the theater, you just show them your watch and they scan the barcode or your QR code, so they can play together if they want to, but you're not requiring that you have a phone to use that app on the watch.
Right. What are examples of where you have to have it on the phone too?
Depends on the functionality that you're trying to do. So with that same theater application example, generating QR codes isn't really something you can do on the watch natively right now. And so when you purchase your ticket on the watch, if there is a companion phone app it can talk to, it sends a request to the phone asking for the QR code. The phone can use the native libraries to generate that QR code, send it back to the watch, and attach it to that record. So you give the user the ability to have extra functionality, but again, it's not required for the app to function.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That makes complete sense.
And Drew, if you'd like to access the accelerometer on the watch, then you can just natively use the Core Motion framework.
Oh,
just from the watch.
Right.
Like you don't need the phone to do that.
Right. Core Motion's been supported since WatchOS 2.0.
Okay.
I love when people are researching things while we're talking to them, because it's just like, oh yeah, here's this.
Very
Makes me
cool.
very happy. Now, in the when SwiftUI was introduced, it sort of blew the roof off the house. But now they've introduced SwiftUI for the watch, and basically everything that you were doing on the watch you can do in SwiftUI.
Yep. Yeah, I actually, the year they announced SwiftUI, I was lucky enough to be at WWDC, my one and only time. And yeah, blew it off the roof was definitely what happened.
Well, the logos were exploding heads.
Just a couple years ago, if you were doing WatchOS development, it had its own dedicated framework. There were these WK for WatchKit prefixes on everything.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you had a WK list, you had a WK text field, and honestly, I think it was a nightmare. Now you just simply go in there with SwiftUI and a couple lines of code, you've got your great interface, just like when we went from the massive view controllers to a few lines of SwiftUI. It's groundbreaking.
So go ahead.
Do you find, though, are people finding who had existing watch apps or who have more complicated ideas that, like, okay, there's still stuff that I need the WatchKit API for, that I need the WK whatever way of approaching UI?
So the navigation in SwiftUI, I still feel is very lacking. When you navigate down through multiple layers of a view and then you want to jump back to a certain point, for example, the WatchKit framework still provides you that sort of jump to the root of the stack.
Okay.
Honestly, though, the only reason I would suggest a company to use the older framework is if their product needs to be supported on a device that's so old that it can't work with SwiftUI.
Now, can you mix and match? So you're using SwiftUI and the WK, the WatchKit, the older framework?
I never tried that. I think you could, but it would probably be pretty confusing.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it with UIKit, so you can work with SwiftUI and UIKit, because SwiftUI has been evolving. So what they did is, at Apple, they made them fully compatible. So because SwiftUI didn't have all the elements that UIKit had, so you could use them both. So I guess that with the
I'm just getting the image in my head of using a hosting view controller on the watch. It just, that scares me.
Indeed.
Having flipped in the app between SwiftUI and UIKit in both directions, uphill both ways in the snow.
Okay,
it's
Grandma.
Yeah. Thank you. It's daunting to mix, but it mixable it is.
But it sounds like maybe for watch, we in general don't need to do that. I mean, I guess it's depending on how nested your navigation is.
Yeah, and you can work around it. One of the example chapters does do that type of jumping around. Really, for me, the only reason you would use the older framework is, like I said, if you have to support devices that are that old. But when you consider the percentage of people that immediately upgrade their devices when the new iOS version comes out, I would think that would be a losing cost for a company, because they have to have the developers with so specific knowledge of that one single framework versus being able to let any of their developers pick up parts and pieces of the watch app.
So how far does SwiftUI go back on the watch?
I looked this up. I think it's till 6. I think it's WatchOS 6 is the first. And we're on 7 something now, right?
We're on WatchOS 8.
Oh, are we? Okay.
And it's so confusing. I wish they would keep them in sync. It's the
WatchOS
version
6 is
7, but WatchOS version 8.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that is why I got confused.
Yeah,
Okay.
the watch has a revision, because the watch, if I remember correctly, started with revision 0. And then the WatchOS started with revision 1 at the same time. Because I had a Rev 0 watch. I was one of those crazy people who bought the watch as soon as it was introduced. It was the first, I mentioned this last episode, it was the first Apple product I bought without it having been shaken out or anything else. Which, of course, I regretted a few years later when Watch 0 was deprecated really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get a watch until the 5th version, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But like one of the things I said at the start of that book was, there's two camps of people with the watch. Either it's the most amazing thing ever, or it's meh. And for a long time, I was in the meh camp.
Yeah, I liked that you said that. I'm not all the way there yet. I'm not into the, as in I don't have a watch yet. And so I'm in the, okay, I meh is a bit strong, but I'm in the, okay, let's find out how it will change my life.
As a toy. And I looked at my wife and I said, I want to spend $500 on a toy. You okay with that? And, it was basically just a watch at first. But then, as we played with it more, I was like, oh, hey, I can do Siri on this. Oh, look, I can turn the lights on and off with this. And, now it's just, I don't ever pay for anything unless it's holding my watch out to Apple Pay.
Yeah. I've gotten to the point where the watch is the one thing that I make sure is charged and on me at all times.
When we talked about this in the previous episode, our previous guest we also ended up talking about the convenience of Apple Pay. And so that's interesting that's something that really compels us once we start using it. So Pablo, how about you? Do you have a watch, and what do you use it for most often?
I have a watch. I have the Series 5. And I did have not the first one, but one of the first models. I think it was the 0 and then the first generate, the Series 1, when they started calling them Series 1, 2, 3. So I started with that one. I use it quite a lot for example, for fitness. The fitness app, I think it's amazing having a device in your wrist that detects how much you move, the time you exercise. It tells you when you need to stand up, if you need to breathe. And now it also encourages you to wash your hands. So I think all the fitness, health kit related content is really useful. I think it's really also a wonderful device, so you don't need to rely so much on your phone. So for example, right now we're receiving notifications constantly. And right now you just move your hand up, check if it's important, and then you can pick your phone or just see that it's one of those 1,000 notifications that you can just ignore. So it's really useful for that. What we said of the complication, having information that you can very quickly check and receive what you need, it's awesome. And Apple Pay, it's also a wonderful functionality of the watch. Having the easiness of paying like that is great. So I use it quite a lot for all those things.
Somewhere I think I read that the NFC technology that they're using in Apple Pay, they're also trying to get hooked up with some of the hotels so that you can actually open your hotel room door with your watch as well.
Oh, that would be cool. That's a really obvious extension if they can get that working.
Yeah,
they are also cars. Yeah, that's what I was going to say, to cars.
Does that make you nervous at all that the Apple Watch can unlock, because it unlocks and starts your car, right? And once that's working, or I think I think that is
No.
working now. Isn't that something that they announced at the
There-
last Dub?
It is on a couple specific models. It doesn't make me nervous from a watch standpoint because as soon as you've enabled it for something, it's hackable. So having it work with the watch, if the car already supports some type of remote interaction, just makes life easier. So if you've accepted the, device X is going to be network capable, then you might as well make it work with as many things as possible. Now, I know there's a
Okay.
ton of people that are much smarter about security than me thinking, oh my gosh, she's an idiot.
I've seen too many episodes of Mr. Robot to disagree with. They really talk about the hackability of Internet of Things. But one of the things that I do like, and we haven't mentioned on the security of the phone, the security of the watch, is the fact that the second the watch is taken off, it can't do any of these features. It locks
Right.
itself up the second it loses skin contact.
Oh, interesting.
Which
Yeah.
does make it a little annoying when you're developing an app and you're rotating back and forth between get it installed to the app versus have it on my wrist versus, well, I need it charging while I'm developing, but then it's not touching me, so it's not unlocked. It can be a little fun game of rotate the device.
Go ahead.
Need to add Face ID to the Apple Watch, so you look at the watch and it unlocks.
Doesn't the organizer with simulator and devices, doesn't the devices lock into a phone with a watch?
It does. You plug your phone into your Mac like you were developing an iOS app, and then as long as your phone is unlocked and your watch is unlocked, then it kind of does it over the air, right? It installs it to the watch through the phone.
Yeah, I will
What
say
kind
that,
of
go ahead.
what kind of gotchas have you run into when as you're developing, like trying it in the simulator, the watch apps versus trying it on the actual watch? I mean, how close is the simulator for the watch?
The simulator is very close. It's great. The biggest problem you run into is when you are trying to do something with connectivity, which is what Apple calls when you have the Watch app and the iOS app talking to each other.
Right.
That doesn't work well in the simulator. You can do it. There is a way to tell the iPhone simulator that WatchOS simulator is attached. It's, to me, amazingly complicated and never worked well. So if I was doing anything connectivity related, I just made sure I was always using the physical device to do the debugging.
Okay. Good advice for our listeners, I think.
Yeah, I found one of the more interesting things to do is to try to do something with the watch or even with the phone where I was trying to transport myself from place to place, because you can't really carry the Mac with you to do your code, to watch the watch while you're moving around. I know it does have location that you can feed into the watch. I guess that feeds into I know it feeds into the phone. Does that feed into the watch as well, the simulation?
If I understand what you're saying, yes.
Yeah. Sorry.
So
I
you
got a
can
little
mock
tongue-tied
location.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic in general. It's like, what are these things you might want to try on the watch, and how do you mock all sorts of test scenarios for it as you're using the simulator, or even just a test watch, so you see that it's behaving correctly in like whatever location.
Right. And of course, again, that's all so much easier now that it's SwiftUI and so many of the frameworks have been natively ported to the watch.
Yeah, it really sounds like the whole proposition of writing for this is just way more accessible to junior devs now.
My biggest irritation, honestly, when I was developing was, why didn't they port this framework to work with async? which isn't really watch specific, right? But you'd start playing with your new framework and you've gotten used to doing async await, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, HealthKit doesn't support that yet.
Maybe that's the obvious next thing we're getting. Because if you're...
Yeah, I figure if they're going to be, async await was just, I still say await. Async await was just introduced at last WWDC, and there's always a ripple effect with Apple. They push it down as far as they can, but then everybody else has to pick it up and adopt it as well.
I actually saw something saying that they've now backported it further versions. You no longer need the current version of Swift. They've made it backward compatible at least a couple of releases.
Yeah, Xcode 15.2 was supposed to Xcode 15.2 is supposed to make it so that you can actually use async await with iOS 14. Which is a great thing. I remember we were talking about it when Xcode was in beta, but it seems to have come through. So yeah.
And I will give the quick plug for those who are watching the video. If you look at Pablo's shelf back there, he does have the watchbook sitting. And I'm very jealous because Pablo in Spain has his book and me in the US is the author. I still don't have one.
Oh,
we're going to chalk that up to supply chain.
Yep.
I was surprised because it came really, really quickly. And other editions of other books have been really delayed on my case, but this one was amazingly fast. Yeah, there it is.
Is that a film clapboard behind it? Is that a film? Yeah. Is that a film clapboard behind it?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. For those of you watching, you'll be able to see that, along with "Work Hard, Dream Big," which makes me very thrilled to see. So, one of the things I like asking, and I want to ask both of you this one, having made the deep dive into WatchOS. Let's hope that Apple engineers, maybe even on the WatchOS team, are listening into the episode. What do you want? What's on your wish list? Let me be Santa Claus for a moment. I've got the beard. What would you like to see? I know you've already mentioned the async await on some of the frameworks. Scott, how about you first?
I'm going to let Pablo go first because I don't know how to answer that, honestly.
Okay, so in my case, I've been working some time in other projects, before I joined where I'm working, with health-related devices and things like the rumors that they're going to try and detect the oxygen in blood and things like that. So I think on that side, the Apple Watch, that's a device that you can wear with yourself. You have it all day long. It's amazing. So, for example, the thing that now you have an electrocardiogram that you can take, even though it's obviously not a 100% medical device, you can at least have an idea of how that works. You have your heart rate. So, for example, in the medical world, to detect an arrhythmia, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not 100% sure. So maybe if someone is a doctor, sorry if I say something that's not 100% accurate. But to detect an arrhythmia, you have to do the test when someone is having an arrhythmia. So it's quite difficult. And what they do is they give them the device, they take it home, and it's something that's big. With devices like this, because you need only 2 points of detection, you can do the test because you're wearing it all day long. And if you have something like that, you have that information, you can provide it to a doctor and he can read the electrocardiogram, he can check your heart rate. So I think on that side, the Apple Watch will probably surprise us. Things like for diabetes or things like that. I think that's a whole world that could be amazing and that could improve the life of people that have those issues quite a lot. So that would be something great to see for the watch.
Some expansion in the medical sensors.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think the medical sensing would be it for me as well. The frameworks are good. They're going to just keep progressing and getting more and more integrated. Um, I actually bought a watch for my father who's in his 80s specifically because he's not so stable anymore, and I wanted
Right.
the fall detection. Unfortunately, we watched him fall two separate times, and the watch didn't flag it as a fall either time. And so that
Okay,
was,
so something's not right there, and I'm
well,
sorry.
it is. There's a lot of caveats Apple has about what it will think of as being a fall. Um, the other big one that I'm interested in is there's been rumors for a couple of years that they're somehow going to be able to check your blood sugar without actually taking blood. And so, like Pablo said, diabetes, that one I think would be huge if we could have
Wow.
something on our wrist that was just, constantly checking for low or high blood sugar.
I wonder, and I don't know too much about this, but you know how a lot of people like following these keto diets,
Hmm.
okay? And that you check if you're in ketosis. It's a urine test strip. Sorry, maybe you're gonna have to cut this out. But I wonder if there's whatever is being detected in that test strip, is that something that could be detected via your wrist? And because then that opens, people who follow this are crazy for that approach of weight loss, and so that could open a whole bunch more apps and sell a bunch of watches.
Yeah, and the ignorant part of me, medical related, says, well, there's no way they can check for blood sugar without blood. But I would have said that about checking your blood oxygen level as well, and they did that.
Yeah,
I mean, with the
it's
blood, with the blood level, the blood sugar level, I know there are things that people wear that are constantly injected into the skin that are doing the blood check there. And if those things had NFC communication, they could easily
That's
be
only for
paired to a
type 1
watch.
diabetes, though.
I beg your pardon?
That's only for type 1 diabetes. Most
Okay.
people have type 2 diabetes, and you don't
mm,
have those things for type 2, except for rare circumstances.
but is the broader point of perhaps that your watch can communicate with any of these other devices, and that also opens the potential use cases super wide. That's interesting.
Right, right. And having the
Yeah.
watch be able to be a standalone app now is great for a lot of those things as well. The most obvious one, of course, is people that are running or working out. You don't need to figure out how to strap a phone to yourself anymore. It can just be your watch.
Mhm.
But then,
Right.
similarly, you go somewhere, you forgot your phone. Well, you can still start your car. You can still, you know, pay for
Pay
your
for lunch.
food. Yeah.
Even
Yeah,
call
that
someone.
Yeah. I don't
yeah,
know about
that's
you, but
really
I
compelling.
don't know about you, but I constantly feel like Dick Tracy when I answer a phone call on my wrist.
I was going to use that reference, but then I thought our guests were potentially too young to understand it.
I was thinking about the shoe phone myself.
Oh, there you go.
Yes. Yes. So you had mentioned, one of you guys, maybe Scott, had mentioned the integration of the watch and HomeKit, and that was interesting to me too. So what cool things could you potentially do with your watch and HomeKit? You can turn your lights off and on. Are there other cool things you could do?
All the same things you do with an iOS app. I think it was Jesse Catterwall, hopefully I said his name right,
Hmm.
uh, did an article on the Ray Wenderlich site actually about using your watch to control your home lights, which was great. I pulled that thing right out and I played with it, and without having to have the big phone on me, you're walking through the house and you realize, oh, my daughter left her lights on again. I just hit Siri on my watch and say, turn off Genevieve's bedroom, and out go the
Yeah,
lights.
I've switched entirely to Philips bulbs throughout my entire house, and those the Philips bridge for the hue lights integrates perfectly with HomeKit so that you can basically change coloration, you can change rooms. The new HomePod minis are also integrated with the HomeKit so that you can actually use the watch to send a message or to speak a message that will play on all the other HomeKits and the HomePods in the house.
Oh, this is really compelling.
Yeah, I know, because when I go to sleep, I go to sleep early because half my team is in India, the other half is in Ireland, so I have to be up very early in the morning. The 15-year-old, however, in the next room over is loud playing Minecraft, and I will turn off the lights, I will get comfortable in bed, and I'll realize he's still up. And I'll just raise the watch to my mouth and go, okay, it's time for you to turn off the lights, or it's time for you to turn the volume down. I'm going to sleep.
And then that comes out of his HomePod?
And that comes out of his HomePod mini in his room.
We have the lights in the family room hooked up that same way to the Hue lights.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'll go to bed and I'll wake up and realize it's like 1 a.m. and my wife's still down there reading a book or whatever. And I'll tell the lights to turn off and on and back off. And all of a sudden she starts coming up going, okay, it's time. You don't have to yell out. You just turn the lights off on them.
Another really good example of this is that my wife is hard of hearing. Without her hearing aid, she's deaf. And if there is an emergency that I need to reach her while she's in a specific room, I can't call downstairs. I may not be able to message her. I can actually flip the lights red.
Yeah.
She sees that instantly. She contacts me on messages. So that's basically a password around the house that if there's an emergency situation, flip the general lights red and we'll respond.
Nice.
Yeah. Also, you have the location aware. So with the watch and the phone, when you arrive home, for example, you can program it that if you arrive after a specific hour, certain lights turn on. So, for example, I have the garage downstairs, and when we arrive and it's dark, then the lights to get up turn on. So we don't have to start taking out the phone and turning on lights because we arrived. It detects that we joined the Wi-Fi network, and it automatically switches on the lights we want.
That's one of my biggest complaints, honestly, with Apple, and it sounds so stupid, but you can tell your watch or your iPhone, when I get home, do XYZ. Except in my previous house, in this house, Apple thinks my home is 20 feet into the backyard or out on the side of the house. And so it doesn't actually register me as coming home. And I want to be able to go into Apple Maps and click on my house and say, this is what home means, not out there on the street.
Yeah.
Yeah, virtual, I forgot what the term is, not virtual gatekeeping, but the interactions I found have always been weak on, I want to be within 3 feet of my home. Granted, it's also difficult for me because my home is actually in a dead spot. So as I hit my driveway, I lose all net. And then I get to the garage and net starts to come back up again.
Yeah, but it sounds like for some of the cooler applications of this, that's got to work perfectly. Like you've got to have all the coverage, and then Apple needs to do their part to know where you actually are. I feel like as somebody who has not really explored what I can do in terms of a smart home that much yet, I feel like there's so much potential here for us as end users and for us as devs in terms of what can be done. Like it's a very exciting area.
Everything except locks on the door.
No, my lock on the front door is controlled by.
I don't know.
Mine too.
I don't want to think of my front door as hackable.
Well, I mean, it's literally hackable, right?
Well, it's
like
true.
you could just
pick it in.
Yeah, I figure if you're smart enough to be able to hack into that lock in the front door, come on in, right? 'Cause your average person's going to walk around to the back and break a window anyway. It's not like I'm stopping somebody that really wants in. And
That's
if you're
true.
good enough to
I,
hack that, it's probably not my house you're going after.
I was going to say I have a friend that teach me lock picking once, and I had a security lock, and it was really well. At least the advertising was that wasn't no one was going to be able to open that door, and with 2 pieces of metal, he opened it in less than a minute. So
Oh,
I
wow.
thought with an electronic one, he's going to have it much more difficult. And as Scott said, if someone is smart enough to hack something like that, welcome in. I think that the people that have that knowledge have studied so much that they tend to go on a different path on their career. So
That makes sense. Remember, this entire episode is to sell Suzanne on getting a watch and to sell me on getting an electronic lock.
It's going well, guys. So Scott and Pablo, both of you guys, you come home, you just like kind of hold your wrist up to the door, or do you not even have to do that and the door unlocks?
in my case, I need to get close to the door to open it, or with the app, you press a button and then it unlocks the door. Yeah.
Yeah, with my front door, if it notices the app running, then you can just touch your finger to the lock, and then it talks to your device and opens the door.
So cool, you guys. So space age. Who knew?
All right, so now I've got to change gears for a second since we've talked about all of these wonderful automated tools. Let's talk about 7-year-olds, 5-year-olds, and 3-year-olds for a moment and how they interface with these devices.
In my case, it's really, really funny because obviously my 3-year-old, for example, is starting to learn to speak. So trying to talk to Siri to do things is really funny because sometimes he manages to pronounce Siri correctly, but the instruction is not very clear, or the other way around. So you look at him in front of the HomePod, for example. We have a smart, how do you call it? Where the thing that where you plug to a lamp. I forgot the name.
Like a smart plug.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. So we have a smart plug, and right now with all the Christmas decorations, so we have the Christmas tree with a smart plug, and you can say, "Hey Siri, activate Christmas," and the Christmas tree turns on.
Oh,
So it's really funny to see my little kid trying to make Siri turn on the Christmas tree, and Siri obviously not always understand what he's saying. But it's amazing because I think like it starts learning, and sometimes I even don't know what he's saying, but he has said it so many times, and I sometimes go to the HomeKit app and I turn it myself, so he says whatever and I turn it on and he thinks that he has managed it. And sometimes even Siri understands that mix of language he has.
that's wonderful. Scott, how is dealing with the electronics and you?
She loves the iPad and the phone.
Did I hear a heavy sigh before you said that?
Oh yeah.
So what kinds of stuff does she do on there? What's compelling to her on the iPad and on the phone? And does she have access to a watch? Does she ask you when she's getting a watch? Does she use yours?
So as far as the iPad and the phone, she loves to play the games or the little beauty apps, those types of things. As far as the phone, as far as the watch, I kind of wanted to get her an Apple Watch because she's hit the age now where it's like, okay, well, we should be letting her run to the next street over by herself to play with her friend, but I'm
Right.
paranoid about getting kidnapped or something.
Right.
And so I was thinking, well, the watch has got a GPS on it, but at the same time, I can't really justify buying a $500, $600, $700 device for a kid who's going to fall down and break it, and so we haven't gotten her an Apple Watch.
Isn't there some significantly cheaper price point watch, but then I'm wondering if that's one where you have to have the phone with it all the time.
The
Yes.
SE.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why that watch still exists. I don't think anyone should buy it. Sorry, Apple, because very little works with it anymore. And I think they just have it to be able to say, oh, yeah, we have this really low price point watch. So we actually went out and we found a kid specific GPS watch that, you've got to buy a SIM card and stick it in there. And I can set a couple zones. So, like, if I see she's left the area of her friend's house, I get an alert. And then,
Oh,
of
that
course,
sounds like that works
freak
well.
out,
What
jump in the
is that
car.
you bought?
It's called a Lil Tracker,
Okay.
LIL Tracker.
Let's get that in the show notes because other people are going to want to know that. Yeah, because I remember when I was a kid, we had what I thought was a super cool playground. It's actually just like a regular small neighborhood playground, but I was allowed to go to it all by myself. And it was just like, 2 blocks away. And it's great if we can let our kids do that. And if technology gets us some peace of mind in letting them do that.
Right.
How about you, Pablo? Do your kids, well, actually your kids are a little bit younger, so they're probably a little young to free range to playgrounds and stuff.
Sometimes, well, I leave them the iPad to play some games, but that's all they do. They are 3 and 5, so yeah, they are a bit young to interact with them. They know how to use it, and it's amazing to see young kids that they have like this. They have interiorized the way of how do you say, the way of interacting with these devices. So they manage the iPad perfectly. They know how to open an application, how to go out. They take away notifications so they don't bother them. But yeah, specifically they use it to play or watch YouTube Kids. That's mostly what they do.
Yeah, I have a 10-foot projector screen up in the media room that I've got the Xbox plugged into. And it's no longer my Xbox, it's now hers. She gets home from school and runs up there and plays Roblox.
Yeah, it's going to get worse.
I don't know. It sounds fun.
Mine's on Minecraft.
As long as it's Roblox and Minecraft and not Fortnite just yet, that'll come, I guess, or whatever is cool at the point that your kiddos are the right age for something a little more realistic or intense, I guess.
Yeah, she saw some advertisement the other day that was Pennywise. Remember the clown from It? And of course, it freaked her out. And then at the bottom of it, it said, "This is absolutely real." And we're like, "Honey, I promise you it's not real. I can show you him getting in his makeup. It's not real." You're just like, oh, why did they show these things?
Suze, do you want to ask about the work-life balance?
I do want to ask about work-life balance because we're talking about our families. And I remember when my kids were small, my kids are grown up now, but I found that really challenging maintaining, and I actually stayed home for a number of years. I found it really challenging maintaining the professional self and the parent self. And so I'd love to know how you guys manage it. Both Scott and Pablo, your dads, you are contributing tremendously in our RayWenderlich.com ecosystem, and you're contributing tremendously outside in your professional life. How do you do it? How do you find the time? What are your tips and tricks for other parents listening so they can be who they want to be as devs and who they want to be as parents?
Have an amazing wife to help you.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Exactly that.
So we should be looking at it in terms of what our family contribution is. So we should be looking at it as like, okay, as a family, how are we managing our parenting? How are we managing our work selves? How are we managing our extracurriculars? And not necessarily like each individual.
Yeah, that's the one thing that COVID did make a little harder because now that we are working at home, both my wife and I are lucky enough that we work from home every day now. So you don't have that, oh, it's 5 o'clock. I need to drive home and make dinner and that kind of stuff. You're already there. And
Hmm.
so it's so much easier to all of a sudden realize, oh, it's 6 o'clock and I still haven't fed the kid. You've kind of got to be more on top of it now of, well, what time is it? Why am I still working? Why did I work right through lunch when normally I would have gotten up and left the building and, taken a little break? And so it is much easier to lose that work-life balance by working at home.
Oh, interesting. So you think maybe because we can more easily get into a flow state that flows right through the whole day, and then we miss like
Yep.
our normal stopping points.
Oh, I don't even want to count the number of days that I miss lunch.
I don't know, you
It's
guys. I love lunch. I'm doing this
just-
I'm doing this intermittent fasting thing where you only eat between 12 and 8. And let me tell you, 11:59, I'm on it. I'm like, okay, almost time to feed.
Yeah.
So-
I think that also it's a matter of organizing. So if you have someone that helps you, like your wife or whoever gives you a hand, and you can both do that teamwork of arranging things so that they work, it's the way you can do much more things that you think you're able of.
So let's humanize the engineers and take you away from the computers. What's fun? What do you do when you are not attached to a computer or a book writing about a computer or something like that? What is a relaxing outlet for you, Pablo?
Well, I really like quite a lot computers, so a lot of my hobbies are related to them. But I'm also an amateur magician. I like magic a lot, especially card magic. So that's one side of my time. I try to practice, and I have a group of magicians here in Madrid, and every now and then we get together and share magic tricks and secrets and things like that. So that's a fun part that I really enjoy.
How's your 4-card Ohmsley count?
Very well.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Scott, how about you? What are some of your interests?
Well, before COVID, I used to play quite a bit of competitive pool, like 8 ball, 9 ball, 10 ball.
Ooh, nice.
That was my thing for many a year.
Any snooker?
No, I never liked snooker.
Mm-hmm. Anything to keep you busy now with COVID?
The kid.
Yeah, 7 is that age, isn't it?
Yeah, and being an only child, it's she wants more mom and dad time.
I was an only child until I was 7, so I know what that was like. I also know what it was like to suddenly no longer be the only child.
Yeah, because you
Yeah.
were well old enough to think about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, at one point she said something about wanting, a little brother or sister, and we said, but honey, we give all our love to you. If we had another one, we wouldn't be able to, have as much time for you. And that was the end of that.
Oh, that's evil. That's so evil.
it's right on. You just lay out the cost benefit analysis and let your client decide.
Yeah, I've been incredibly lucky though that she's pretty supportive of it, and Amy made the time to keep her entertained nights and weekends for quite a while so that I could work on this book. And it's I think in answer to your original question, Drew, that just having the supportive family is really what makes it possible.
That's awesome.
And she's got her own full workload. She works full time just like I do, so it's not like she's just got all this free time to do it, just picked up the extra load.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's fantastic that you guys are able to flex so you both can be professionals and both be happy with how you're as happy as one ever is with how one is being as a parent. It never feels like you're doing a good job, but eventually they grow up and then you can be like, "Hey, I did a pretty good job."
Oh
So,
yeah, I've got her snookered. She tells me I'm the best dad in the world. And I frequently remind her to tell her uncle that, who's really good with kids.
so we return now to the computer. Are you guys working on now? And this is a big ask. So if the answer is no, then it'd be like, well, that makes sense because you have little kids at home. But are you guys working on personal projects like passion project apps in addition to all these other things you're doing? And if you are, or if you're contributing to open source, I'd love to hear more about that.
In my case right now, no, I'm not with any personal project. I'm trying to study new things. So I'm focusing right now on learning new technologies. So I've left a little bit the personal project on that side. I would love to, but there's limited time. So I'm focusing right now on studying.
So Pablo, what new technologies are you leaning into right now?
Right now, I'm starting to learn quantum computing. I think it's really interesting with a huge potential, and it takes a lot of time to understand and learn about it. So yeah, I'm focusing right now on that.
Easy bedtime reading.
Yeah. So some light material in between romance novels.
Okay, so for the beginner dev here, which is me, what's the super high level view of what's quantum computing?
Have fun there, Pablo.
Yeah. Basically, quantum computing is trying to provide a different approach on how to solve problems that are unsolvable by a classical computer, because there are some mathematical problems that they grow exponentially. So there's a point from beyond that you cannot solve it even in million years using the full power of all the computers we have. Quantum computer uses a different approach because they try to use the properties of quantum mechanics that allow, basically in a classical computer we have a bit that's either 1 or 0, and in a quantum computer you can have a qubit that can be in state 1, 0, or both at the same time. So that makes the possibility of analyzing problems in a way that's unthinkable with a classical computer. So, well, the approach right now, it's in giving the baby steps, quantum computing. But if we look at how classical computing has evolved in the past 70 years, the potential that technology has is amazing.
Okay, that sounds really exciting and also really complicated.
Well, it's like everything. You just have to get started from the beginning and you start growing your knowledge. It's not as hard as it sounds.
Scott, are you working on any pet projects?
No, I'm taking a much needed break before I have to start updating the other 2 books that we've got out there.
Which 2 are yours?
Push notifications and concurrency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that concurrency is mightily changed this year. Is there anything else we want to touch on, or are we happy with what we've got?
If we have stuff to say about it, I'm a little bit curious. The bigger question of like, okay, why program for the watch? And if you're going to program for the watch, and I Googled around about this and didn't find anything really satisfying to me. How can you make money doing that? Like what sells on WatchOS, and okay, if we don't have anything to say to that, can we say about what might be good, fun first projects? So what do you guys think? Like, is there any money to be made?
No. I mean, there's no money to be made. developing iOS apps, right?
Mm.
The days of Angry Birds, right, are kind of gone. They're few and far between who gets it, right? The money really comes, I think, from just the paycheck of a company hiring you to write the app, not continuous revenue sales from the App Store. I'm sure there's 100 people watching the podcast who can say, well, that's not true. But to me,
Yeah, but it's just those 100.
right. I completely stopped doing contract iOS writing, honestly, when I started working with Ray Wenderlich, because there's just so much more opportunity just doing things like writing the books. As far as why would you write a watch app, I think the better question is why wouldn't you? If you're creating an app already, either iOS, iPad, with it being so easy now to integrate, why would you not add that extra experience to make it even easier for your end users to use your app?
Okay, that's really good feedback. So like at this point, it's become such low-hanging fruit. Just do it. Just write the watch app along with. Really
Right.
good.
When I
So
play with the iOS projects, I'm sorry, with the Xcode projects, I have my iOS target, my notification target, my watch targets, and most of the code is up in a folder that I call shared, because it's all the files that apply to all those targets. And then I have a couple files in the watch area that are specific and a couple in the iOS area that are specific. But with it being SwiftUI now, a bunch of the views could look the same, depending what you're doing, of course. But a good chunk of that code is just shared across all the versions.
This has made
truly,
me
that's
reconsider.
amazing.
I've been working on my pet project, and my pet project is actually a 2.0 evolution of an older project that's white labeled. And I said on the old one that's been released, it's got a watch app, but on the new one, I wasn't going to attach the watch app. And now I can sit back and go, I may as well just find something that I can attach that expresses some of this app in a smaller function.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's clearly a takeaway message from
Yeah,
this episode is
I'm not sure
yes, you should
what,
do that.
but I
But
should do it.
And remember,
yeah,
you'll have some people searching the App Store for apps for the watch, right? That may be how they start. And so if you do support the watch, well, now you have it in with that person as another customer. And then they might decide, oh, the iOS app also adds so much more functionality that, I do that as well.
okay,
Yeah,
that's
I
a
must say,
really good. I was
sorry.
just going to say that's a
No,
really good app marketing tip that it's like essentially it's another keyword. Don't leave that field blank because it's so easy. Make sure you've got something on the watch. So if people are searching by watch, they hit on you.
All right.
Pablo, what were you going to say?
no, exactly that. Sometimes I have found applications by searching for Apple Watch apps, and that's where I have discovered some interesting apps because obviously the catalog is much smaller for the Apple Watch. So, and you want to try your device and look for cool applications that use it in different ways. And I have found quite a few really interesting applications, not by looking on the iOS App Store, but by looking on the watch store.
Oh, very cool.
Excellent.
So what about, okay, so we know, and I agree from years at this, you're unlikely to make money as an indie writing iOS, much less writing just for watch. But what if, never mind that, you want to get started, you want some fun ideas of what would be a good watch app to write? Where would you tell people, like, if they're getting started, like, and what have you thought about? Okay, if I was going to do a personal project, here's what I'd do. What are, can we brainstorm some good starting points for our listeners?
I think in the book, in one of the chapters, Scott explains how to build a Pong for the Apple Watch. That's a really cool project, and I think there are quite a few very little games for the Apple Watch. I think that's a world to discover. And obviously, it's not a great. You don't have a big screen to play, but I think there are some cool ideas that you can turn into a game to play in those times that maybe you're at a doctor's appointment, you're waiting, and you want to kill some time, and you have like a small game in your watch. That could be a cool project, and maybe a good idea would be a nice thing to have in your wrist.
And remember, core motion is there, so you can use the accelerometer, and you can sit there in your doctor's office flicking your wrist like you have some horrible tick, and enjoy a game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Scott, what would you add in terms of what might be fun beginner projects for people getting started with programming the watch in SwiftUI?
I was going to mention the Pong, and he stole it from me.
Sorry. It's a really cool project on the book. Yeah.
Okay, we're at about an hour and a half at this point. Scott or Pablo, do you have anything you want to add in that we could cover or have missed?
When you said what would be nice to add to the watch, I just remember that I thought of it days ago, and I think that would be really cool. You know that regular watches, they have this mechanism that they work because you move your hand, so like you charge your phone with the movement of your hand. That would be an addition. Obviously, the charging that this needs would require much more energy, but that would be cool that the movement that you do with your hand helps charging the watch. That would be a cool feature to see.
I'd love to see that. That would be fantastic.
How about a clear solar panel for the screen of the watch?
Also,
like it would just like lay over the face of it?
Yeah.
You know, I know that they're really, really tiny solar cells. They're called microscale photovoltaics, and they're tiny. They're like the size of glitter. And, you know, those could be like embedded around the watch face and actually like look like glitter and be very cool. And you could use that to charge.
Okay, Apple, if you're listening in, now you know what we want. All right, I'm going to wrap things up. So we've managed to completely drill our way through the watch, through WatchOS, through the book. It's been amazing. And this is a book I want on my shelf. Scott, Pablo, I want to thank you both for being on the show. It has been an incredible walk today.
Thanks for having us.
no, thank you.
Yeah, really nice to meet you both. And great topic. Lots to learn.
So much to learn. Coming up,
Enjoyed.
Oops, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that I have enjoyed a lot this conversation. So thank you for inviting us to talk about this very interesting topic.
Coming up in 2 weeks, we're going to have Super Jyoti Sen on, who's going to be talking about Android app distribution. For those of you who are actually listening from the Android world, yes, we will be talking Android tech on the show this season. 2 weeks after that, we're going to have co-host Alex Sullivan come back to the show. And if there's something you'd like to ask him, you can always email us at podcast@raywenderlich.com, especially if it involves avocado toast, which he got me hooked on back during that season. But in the meantime, for my guests, Scott Grosh and Pablo Mateo, and for my co-host, Susanna Skaya-Gupta, I am Drew Freeman. I will be with you, and we will be with you again in 2 weeks. But in the meantime, it's back to the Emerald Castle. Ray, back to you.
And that's a wrap. Thanks again, everybody, for listening to the RayWenderlich.com podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to leave a rating on iTunes. See you next time.